All right, today we're making a simple country sourdough using proof flour mill Rouge de Bordeaux heritage flour. I'm going to start with some lukewarm water. This water is not quite warm enough that you'd want to take a bath in it, but getting there. It's quite warm to the touch and comfortable. 457 grams, I'm at 460. 3 grams plus or minus, not that big of a deal for water. For salt, kind of a bigger deal at these smaller batch levels. And the reason you want to use warm water is it's a small amount of dough and it will lose its heat more quickly than some of the batches that we're using in our bakery, which have the mass to sort of retain their heat. So you want to keep that in mind and mix with that warmer water to make up for the home setting where the dough is likely going to cool down to the temperature of the air around us, which is a little bit too cold for our liking. So 305 grams of this beautiful Rouge de Bordeaux flour. It has a bit of a red hue, a nice aroma. It's been used for hundreds of years for bread baking. On its own, you can use it in full. However, we're going to blend it 50-50 today. So we're going to put equal parts, another 305 grams of Central Milling Type 85 organic flour. This is a nice organic white flour as a base. And by using the combination, I should get an airier and lighter loaf than I would get otherwise if I was just using the Rouge. But all the flavor and a lot of the extra nutrition is coming from that heirloom grain. I've grown it here in Arizona locally in conjunction with a farmer that we committed to buy 40 acres from this upcoming year. So our team got to visit the field as it was growing, and we've now been milling it for the last several months. It's been quite a fun experience. We actually use this Rouge Bordeaux at the bakery as a big part of our country sourdough formula. This recipe here today is just a little bit different than what we use at the bakery. It's a little bit simpler, but otherwise it should be a really nice starting point. Now we're just going to grab 12 grams of salt and set it aside ready. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself and forget the most important component, which is our sourdough starter. 122 grams need to go into the bowl. Just keeping it really simple and putting these ingredients in as convenient, but I tried to start with water first. It's a good way to prevent clumping at the bottom of your bowl. All right, that's a good measure. Now we'll add the salt on top and get this one on the mixer. Always want to start out nice and slow, so we'll keep this one going. Now, I'm using a really entry-level KitchenAid mixer to do this, and the dough will end up developing some strength. By the end, I might have to kind of hold this mixer down to keep it in place if I do want to go in kind of a faster speed, because it'll have a little bit of a bouncing effect. Spiral mixers are really the best for making dough, and maybe I should invest in a home one myself, but you can definitely get the job done with this, and I'm guessing that if you have a mixer in your kitchen, it probably looks more like this and less specialized to start. So this is definitely a great starting point in your bread making journey. So now my flour, water, salt, and sourdough starter are coming together, but they appear really shaggy. And so I'm gonna let this mix go for a little while so that it can develop. I can crank up the speed a little at this point. I'm on the equivalent of speed 3 for this mixer. And in a moment, I'll want to scrape down the sides of my bowl. I'll let this go for a little while and wash my hand off. If you are mixing at home and you don't have the central milling flour, you might get very different results. That base flour, well, really whatever flour you're using, including our Rouge, it's important. The protein content of the flour matters. All the variables matter. Central milling flour is grown in the Intermountain states in the US, the flour's super strong. So you can see this dough's already coming together. Although to my eye, I don't see something very silky or smooth yet. Mostly I still see something that's shaggy. And that gives me a clue that I've got to keep this going for a little while. I'm expecting the total mix time to be in the neighborhood of 5 minutes. And for the last little bit, I can knock it up into speed 4. By the end of it, the dough will be behaving just a little bit differently, and from the surface level, I'll see mostly a smooth, uniform surface. So not quite there yet, but we're getting closer. It's about halfway through the mix now. I still have it in speed 4, and because I'm using this KitchenAid Classic Plus, giving it a little bit of a hand at the moment in order to keep it still. The head kind of likes to jerk back and it makes the mixer move. It's not too hard to hold it in place though if this is the KitchenAid that you have. If you haven't bought a mixer yet and you really want to make bread, again, a spiral mixer is your best bet. But if you do want to do other things other than make bread or things you can do in a spiral mixer, and you're looking for a stand mixer like this, I do recommend going up to the KitchenAid Professional. You'll end up getting a fixed head that doesn't do this sort of bouncing around. We're getting a lot closer on this mix. I don't have to develop the gluten fully as a home baker that's making a beautiful loaf for my family. I can do some of the development work by hand as I do my stretches and folds, which are the next thing I'm going to do after this mix. And so I really am probably only going to allow this to go 1 more minute. That will give me a total mix time of about 5 minutes, with the first half being slow and the second half being in this speed of 4. I can already tell that my surface of my dough is starting to get a lot smoother. The dough is starting to try to bounce around the edges of the bowl as it moves around. Typically a good sign that development has gone a sufficient amount of the way. So I'm going to give this one a stop and check this dough now. At this stage, it might be a little sticky to the touch, and that's okay. Give it a quick window pane test. It doesn't have to pass, but getting close is nice, and it certainly is getting close. With this window pane, I would argue that it's even passing. That's full development for this dough. So again, you might have to mix yours longer to get this result, depending on what flour choices you're using. So if you want to buy our flour at proofmill.com, then you can at least have 50% of this secured. And the central milling flour would be what we're using here, the Type 85, as a base. I've touched enough dough that the dough isn't sticking to me, but I imagine many of you would find this to be sticky, so you might have a little bit of a harder time getting this out. But I'm going to put this away now and then come back to it, not for a few hours, to be honest. I need to store it in a warm place and give it about 3 hours to rise before I go ahead and start my folds. But this is my Rouge Bordeaux country. So with wet hands, after 3 hours of having your dough in a warm place, it's time to do the first fold. Use one hand to hold onto the bowl. Just go all the way around. Feel free to take the dough out. Get a little bit better tension, sometimes right on the table. When you've built up about as much tension as the dough will allow, you can put it back to rest. It's okay to cover the dough with a little bit of flour so that your tea towel doesn't stick to it. And keep it in a warm place for about 30 minutes. It's time to fold our Rouge sourdough for the second time. Make sure my hands are wet. Hold onto the bowl with one, really give it a good stretch and fold it in on itself. Grab another piece and just keep working your way around. The goal is to really get a stretch, and that's why sometimes you really have to just bring the loaf out to do so. Trying to add tension. I'm just going to do this right on the counter. You could think of this as the same type of thing we might do when we shape it later, but I am just adding more tension into it, which is the whole purpose of folding. When I see that the top is tearing like this, I've taken it as far as it will go. There's no benefit in going further. I'm just going to rip the gluten that I have worked to develop. So once it's resisting me, it's time to put it back. Remember, store this in a warm place so that it keeps fermenting. It's pretty easy for this low of a mass to cool down, and then you sort of lose your fermentation curve and things take a lot longer that way. All right, I'm ready for the last fold for my Rouge country. Looking nice in the bowl. It's retained its shape pretty well. Make sure my hands are wet. Just gonna take the dough right out of the bowl, flip it over, give it a stretch, fold it over, stretch it some more, rotate it around until I build nice tension. Retaining a nice amount of warmth, although the dough is colder than when I first mixed it. Something to keep in mind, that's what's going to happen, especially when you're working with small batches. So using that warm water could be the difference between a bad loaf and a good one at the end. Really, fermentation is happening at a fast rate when the loaves when the dough is warm. But fermentation really slows down at a non-linear level with drop in temperature. So the difference between 70 and 80 is huge. So make sure your dough stays warm throughout this bulk fermentation process. Now that I'm approaching the 5-hour mark in about 30 minutes, I'll be ready to put my final shape together and throw these 2 loaves into bannetons. It's been about 6 total hours since I mixed this dough. I kept it warm, it's gotten a nice rise, went through its 3 sets of folds, and we're about to put it into its home stretch here. It's the Rouge Bordeaux sourdough, 50-50. So I'm taking out all of my dough, and I'm basically just going to divide this into 2 loaves that are each 600 grams. Nearly on the money there. Let's see where this one's weighing in. Right there as well. So to shape these, there's a reason why I went round. It's the easiest shape. What I like to do is just stretch and then bring what I stretch out into the middle, then turn over the loaf once I've gone all the way around and tighten it by bringing those edges into the middle some more as I round. I'd like to finish with a nice skin on top where you can even start seeing some bubble formation. So that's all there is to it. Now I'm going to go seam side up into my banneton. So you can see that's the seam, meaning when I go to bake this in the morning, I'll turn it out and that seam will be on the bottom. So now that I've gotten to this stage, I can cover it and place it in the fridge. I'll just shape the other one first. If the dough's sticking to you here, you can use flour or water on your hands to help prevent the sticking. I'd prefer water at this stage. Same kind of idea, developed that skin, it's bubbly. Put it away in this one. Now, if you don't have these hair liners, actually what they are, they're bouffant caps. I doubt you have them at home. I have them because I'm a professional baker. But you can just use rice flour and dip the loaf into rice flour on the way, and then it won't stick to the bannetons. If you don't have rice flour, you can opt for regular flour. It just may stick after an overnight rest. Rice flour won't allow it to, nor will something like this. Time to put these away in the fridge. So that's all there was to it. Now I'm just gonna have to finish them out with the bake, and I'll have my 50-50 Rouge bread. My Rouge de Bordeaux country sourdough should be ready to bake now. I'm gonna grab it out of the fridge and give it a score. Dutch oven's now preheated. It's been sitting in this oven, which has been heated to 420 degrees Fahrenheit for about an hour. It's really important that the Dutch oven gets preheated for the results you're looking for. I'm going to line my Dutch oven with some parchment. It'll make it a lot easier to grab this loaf after the bake. That's the only reason for it. You could manage without, just make it a little harder to scoop that loaf. And I'll gently turn this loaf over, then grab along. I'm going to make it very easy today, just a simple X on top with a nice sharp, freshly applied blade. Now, need to just cover the Dutch oven and throw it in the oven. The Dutch oven is what will actually allow for this loaf to retain its steam. The steam within the loaf itself will give it a nice shiny color, but you have to bake in one of these if you don't have a steam injected oven. Okay, we'll want to bake that for about 20 minutes and then give it a check. Probably take the lid of the Dutch oven off and allow the crust to develop for the last few minutes of the bake. My goal right now is just to release steam, but I will bring it out so we can just have a peek as to how it's baking so far. At home, there's no reason for you to take it any further out of the oven than you have to. Really nice, I have a opened up set of ears. This is just going to go back by itself into the oven for the last few minutes of the bake. We'll check on that in about 7 minutes and see how it's developing. We don't want to overdo it. Okay, it's time to check that loaf out that we need to pull from the oven, see how it's doing in developing its crust. It's been about 7 minutes. Again, you don't have to pull it all the way out at home. I'm doing this so that we can take a look at it together. And for me, this loaf is still a little bit light in color. Some of you might like it as is, and so then there you have it, 27-minute bake on this guy. I know it's fully baked all the way through. Now it's just a desired color, and I want it a little darker. Going to grab that loaf out of the oven, take a look again. I think most everybody could appreciate this bake. It is right in the middle. Some people would still be happy to take it a little further than this, but it's a really, really solid bake. So let's go ahead and take that guy out for now. Take a look at the loaf. It has a nice start to what we like to call at Proof an eyeliner on the ears. Amanda probably would take hers further, to be honest, but I think, again, a lot of people that are baking at home probably would consider this even a brave bake and might be tempted to pull it earlier. I really wouldn't pull it any earlier than this for the development of the crust. And I would say if you're baking for yourself and you really want to explore the depths of flavor, push it a little further and see, because the caramelization doesn't hurt. This is a really, really nice bake, but a touch more darkness, a touch more defined eyeliner wouldn't be a bad thing at all. So pretty happy with this though. And it goes to show, you know, making this Rouge Bordeaux, even with an advanced flour that's locally grown, stone milled, it doesn't have to be a hard thing. I didn't use precise temperature, just warm water. It was cold sourdough starter, regular salt, and then of course the flour at room temperature. And I managed the temperature throughout the process, made sure to keep the bread in a warm place as it was in its bulk fermentation time. I refrigerated it overnight, and then just simply scored and baked it in the morning, and really very happy with the results. The whole process, start to finish, active time is well under an hour. I mean, to get all of my supplies ready, probably about 10 minutes. Get through the whole mixing process, another 10 minutes. The whole time that I'm going through stretches and folds, maybe all three combined, another 10 minutes, so you're up to 30. Then let's say another 10 minutes for shaping, then another 10 minutes for the scoring and loading the oven and managing. It's about an hour worth of work spread throughout a day. So I wish you luck as you try this at home. Once this cools down, I'll cut this open and give it a try. All right, let's cut into this 50/50 Rouge de Bordeaux country sourdough. What should I expect? Maybe a slightly denser crumb than you'd find if you went to an artisan bakery, because it's 50% whole grain stone milled flour, but the Type 85 should have balanced it out nicely. Be a little bit of a darker crumb, hopefully even fermentation with enough time going. Wow, nothing wrong with that. I'm really happy with this one. Got a nice even fermentation all the way around. Really nice. Let's go ahead and cut a slice. Beautiful. Some butter on it. I'm gonna cut this in half. Give it a try. The Rouge has a very distinctive flavor in this bread. And so I can say confidently, because we use the stone mill flour, which is packed with flavor and nutrition, it comes through. And yet the loaf is still approachable. I think, you know, any kid would probably be fine eating a sandwich on this bread. It has a really nutty, nice flavor characteristic to it, mild on the sourdough because of the way that we made it overall, the temperature range, the fact that I'm actually using a white sourdough. It will probably develop a little bit more flavor over the next couple days as well. That's just what happens with the sourdough bread, but super delicious. I'm very happy with this result. And it was easy, honestly. I didn't really fuss around. There wasn't any autolyses or bassonages or any more of the advanced kind of nuanced things that we do at the bakery, yet I still got a really great loaf of bread. You can do this too. Did you know that you can now bake at home with the same flours that we use at the bakery at Proof? Proof Flour Mill is our new project. We're using an old school stone mill to mill 5 amazing varieties of grains that you can ship right to your doorstep in order to make beautiful buttermilk biscuits like this or loaves like that. And best yet, you can follow along on our channel where we'll show you how. Head to proofmill.com and browse our selection today.